Over the last decade, the Binding of Isaac has become probably the de facto standard of action roguelike design. And with the recent release of Repentance, this is supposedly Evan McMillan's final official update to the game. And what we're left with is one final bloody and kind of poop-filled hurrah for the franchise. But for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Binding of Isaac is, as we said, an action roguelike, where our big element is that you're going to grow in power by picking up all manner of weird and random artifacts, which in turn will change the properties of your character, letting you affect how you shoot, how you take damage, how much health you have, and so on and so forth. Each level is procedurally generated based off of these handmade runes, which are then stitched together. And as you can tell by the variety of enemies, of course, there is certainly a lot that comes after you. So, the big thing about Repentance has been an across-the-board balancing of the game, as well as an art pass, taking the style back to kind of the more grungier, darker aesthetic that the original Binding of Isaac was about. Now, there is certainly a lot that is going into this one, and some of this may be a little bit over the heads of people who are new, but I'll try to keep things as clear as possible. From a gameplay standpoint, you still have the basic flow of the game. There are now several new bosses and essentially a new set of harder variants for the main path through. And of course, a lot of the stuff becomes unlocked the more that you play through the game and hopefully win each run. And the game's core gameplay loop of unlocking new elements that then appear on persistent or subsequent plays is still very much here. The new environments also bring with it new bosses, new enemies, new elite variants, and this was definitely designed, at least at the top level, to be all about new content for the expert players, the ones who have been and have seen everything in the Binding of Isaac up until this point. And for them, there have been many balance changes that we'll talk about later on in this video. Content-wise, you're going to find that these new enemies are a lot harder, including the new boss fights in the game's new grand finale super duper ultimate maximum final ending that's now in it. And what makes the Binding of Isaac work from an action roguelike perspective is still here. The amount of variance that can occur on any individual run is still, I think, de facto the best out of anything that's in the action roguelike genre to date. And with all the new items that are added in, all the balancing done on that front, means that you're really never going to have the same run twice. And this has always been the strength of the Binding of Isaac series, or just the many expansions of it. And the majority of this video is probably going to be spent more discussing the changes and why they are so polarizing. So, if you've never played the Binding of Isaac before and this is your first time looking at this, then if you don't mind this aesthetic of, lots of poop jokes, as you can see right here, then this is an amazing action roguelike. But where a lot of people have been certainly having discussions about this is with the changes that were made to balancing, specifically on hard mode. And we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into that and discuss things further. And now for a quick thank you to our current Patreon supporters. And if you're interested in my books on design, they are available at most major retailers. 20 Essential Games to Study is for first-time developers looking to be inspired, and the Game Design Deep Dive series covers the history and philosophy of major genres, with horror coming later in 2021. A lot of the changes that Repentance has done has been specifically to counter the skill of master-level players. The people who have figured out all the ways that you can break this game and just utterly demolish it. And for them in mind, Edmund has done a lot to kind of curtail some of that. So, one of the first changes has been just an all across the board difficulty increase, especially on hard mode, Now, things have been patched already a few times, but the amount of bad things that can happen to you, including curses, have been magnified, and many of the best items in Isaac have been nerfed to some extent. As I said in the last part, new enemy types have been introduced, and they can become very annoying. There are a lot more enemy spawners, and there's also faster and more reactive fights. In fact, there are several enemies that attack so fast that even knowing that it was coming, I still couldn't dodge and get out of the way because my character was just too slow. And this occurs way too often, I think, for people looking for more like of a fair fight. Now, one of the other aspects that have been changed has been trying to reduce the number of super awesome builds. And this is what's gotten a lot of people kind of annoyed with this patch. Because some of the more mega items have been nerfed, as well as a lot of items being changed, most of the older strategies don't work the same way or aren't as effective. And this is where we get into that tricky element of balance. Because is something broken because it's bad, or is it not working because we still haven't gotten used to it? And that is a debate that rages in any video game. Now, after spending a good week or so playing through the expansion, winning many times, and seeing through both endings, it's not as doom and gloom as I first thought, but that still doesn't make things perfect. And that's where things get very hard to talk about. As I said, with The Binding of Isaac, this is a series, or a game specifically, that is about mastery. And if you get good enough at this game, not much, maybe except for Delirium, will cause you a lot of trouble. But so much of the new content has been specifically to make things far more demanding and challenging in terms of understanding and figuring out their patterns. If you are a fan of shmup and Touhou style stuff, then some of the new content may feel right up your alley. And I'm going to show off one of the final bosses in the game, and this isn't just to kind of show off that I managed to beat it, but this is very indicative of kind of the new style of Repentance. There are so many enemies and so many patterns that it is borderline impossible to dodge on reaction. You need to know ahead of time what it is that's coming to be able to have any chance of avoiding it. And that was not the case in the original version or in the previous versions of Isaac, where boss patterns and enemy patterns were kept very, I don't want to say consistent, but they were easy for you to process. This time, it feels like it's gone way over. Now, if you, again, are an expert player at this game, you're not going to feel it as hard. And ultimately, this is where kind of the balance lies. Items like Brimstone are still ridiculously overpowered. It doesn't matter if it's been nerfed. If you're good enough at this game, you're going to make do with it. But while the good runs are still really, really good, the bad ones feel 1,000 times worse. If you don't get a damage upgrade item like early on, it becomes a pain to play through Repentance, especially if you get a room full of enemy spawners and you're not able to quickly drill them down. And this is, I think, where a lot of people are going to have arguments over Repentance's balance. Because there are going to be people who will say this game is fine, it's as easy as it is ever, just as there's going to be people who are going to find this way too frustrating. And I feel like there still needs to be work done balance-wise. And that's what makes this very tricky to talk about. Because as you're going to see in this footage of me being Delirium, that I can still, beat a lot of these bosses with the right build very easily. And you are still going to have those god runs where you become, death incarnate. And it's not a matter of if you win, but just how easy the whole run is going to be. But the beauty and nightmare of Biome Isaac is just how much a single run can swing wildly with the items and events that happen. And this makes it a very hard sell for Repentance if you are a new player. On one hand, starting fresh means that you deal with all the new stuff right as it is. One thing that I didn't mention is that on hard mode, enemies have not only had their speed increase, but their bullets have gone up as well in terms of speed. So you basically have to relearn the entire muscle memory of what it means to play the Biome Isaac, while new players won't have to deal with that. But so many of the changes and additions to the game have been in service of making it harder. So it's a very weird position if you're coming in blind to this title. With that said, this is still one of, if not the best, action roguelike on the market. And even with the difficulty concerns, I still can't think of another game that provides this much in terms of just the sheer amount of content variety that you can get in it. And I'm sure there are modders who are still going to keep supporting this game, hopefully when they turn back on mod support. And where will this be in another few years? Or if Edmund decides to once again work on it after the fact. But to wrap up this video, Biome Isaac Repentance is both a fitting and crushing, finale to this franchise. And if you're a fan, you've probably already picked it up, played it, and probably died about a few dozen times by now. If you are just jumping in, then this is still, I think, an amazing title to experience and just learn why this is one of the best action roguelikes. And as always, with discussions like this, there is a chance that things may be updated in a future patch, and these issues may not be in it. But I'd like to thank Edmund for providing me a key to check this one out. If you're interested in my interview with Edmund about the Biome Isaac, I'll include a link to that in the description down below. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. And until next time, take care.